truma. Truma means to set aside, to give. And who are you giving? Well, truma goes to the Kohen, right, to the priest. And learning many laws, we learned yesterday laws of where is it's applicable. Right, that has to be in the land of Israel. Now we're going to speak about appointing an agent. Some things you can have an agent to do for you, some things you can't. How do we know what's what? Because what the Torah says, right? Based on biblical law, and then rabbinic law, whenever that kicks in, is, can be based on, won't be based on a verse, it might be based on other human conditions to take into consideration. So a person may appoint an agent to separate truma, because truma means it's from your produce, right? And yesterday we defined what is produce. It has to be produce that is edible for humans. Then we needed the parameter in that law. And so now that you can appoint an agent, you don't have to do it yourself, all right? For truma and for meiser. So meiser, the truma goes to the kohen, and meisers, and that's approximately 2%. And the tithes, which is meiser in Hebrew, goes to the Levite, which is 10%. After the 2%, then you take the 10%, right?
2% or 10% of total?
10% of what's the remaining from the 98%, right? So it says in the verse, we had it a couple of weeks ago. It said in the verse, so shall you separate also you. The wording includes an agent, right? You shall separate also you. So who's also you? So it can't be a non-Jew. It's not appropriate to be an agent. Why? Because he's not also you. Because you are not a non-Jew. You're a Jew. So it can only be someone who equates between you and the agent. Just as you're a member of the covenant, so it must be someone who's a member of the covenant. Why is that? And remember that what's important over here, it's not for, we're not looking for a rational reason in any of the things that we've done in learning Rambam, because it's what is the Torah telling us. Now, any rationality is subject to, it may be a rationality, it may not be a rationality. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant to the halacha. The only time we need a rationality is if the halacha is suggesting some rationality, and therefore we need that for the parameter of the law, right? To understand the parameter of the law here. But here it says very clearly, also you, because it says Kain Tarimu. It says you shall separate. What do you mean also you? So there's also a you that's like you, so that you're part of the covenant, they're part of the covenant, right? So he can't, because he's not part of the covenant. He's not Jewish. No. It depends what it is. A non-Jew can be in other contexts is not an issue. But here, this is what the verse is saying. So this is what the context is. Finish.
Gentile cannot serve as an agent for Jew in any matter.
Facebook recording of Tanya and Rambam. On first personal page and not on CZK. Hold on, should be. Give me a moment here. Have a look. Aha. Yes, it needs to be reconnected. Give me a moment here so I could bring that there. Thank you, Davida. Okay, I'll have to do it later for some reason. It's not okay. So it won't be there now, but thank you for bringing it to my attention. Okay, so there are 5 types of individuals who not separate truma, and even if they do, the produce they separate is not considered truma. A deaf mute, okay, a mentally or emotionally unstable person, a minor, a non-Jew who separates truma from produce belonging to the Jew, even with his permission, and a person who separates truma from produce that does not belong to him without the owner's permission. So you can't do it for someone else if you don't have permission, right? However, a person who separates truma from his own produce for the produce of others, produce is truma. Let's say I did it for my own produce for someone else, right? So then that's okay. And the college produce that has been prepared for us. Satisfaction of allocating truma belongs to the person who separated it, and he may give it to whoever the priest, to any coin he desires. So if I separated from my stuff for your sake, I could do that, right? And I have the permission to give it to any coin that I want because that satisfaction of allocation is given to the owner of the produce. The way I'm understanding this is the reason why it is effective is because I get a satisfaction of being able to give it to the coin I want, even though it's not for my produce that I'm giving it, right? I'm giving it for someone else. Yeah. Yeah, to any specific one you want to give it to, exactly. The following rules apply when a person separates truma from a colleague's produce without permission. Because remember, the owner of the produce, he has to give it. So it's not it's not a question about that. But he has the right of giving it to the coin that he wants. So might want to give it to a relative. He might want to give it to a friend. He has that right to give it to who he desires to. It's not like what we learned, the gifts for the poor, right? The gifts of the poor, remember the Torah, and this is important. Because it says, Kain Tarimu. Remember, the verse said, so you shall separate. Means you can separate. Who? Gam who? He too. Who's the he too? Is the agent, right? But when it comes to came to for the gifts of the poor, right? The corners of your field, or you drop something and you forgot it in the field, and so on and so forth. What did it say there? It didn't say you had a right to give it to anybody. It says leave it for the poor. So you have no right to give it. It doesn't belong to you to give. Here it's different. It does belong to you to give. Why? Because that's the words in the verse. Okay? And why is that the word in the verse? Because that's what God wants. Why does God want it that way? We're not speculating. Right? I mean, there are commentators that do speculate, right? But that's not got to do with the halachic ruling. Okay? We good? Yeah, we're following? We're good?
We're good.
All
Thank
right.
you.
So and he gathered produce without permission so that he could take for himself, but separate some as truma. Okay. So what happens if a kohen goes into someone's field, right? He gathered produce without permission. So he could take for himself as a kohen. Oh, no, produce for himself. But he separates truma, right? But it sounds like this is a friend. You're going to your friend's field. Now, when the owner comes and says you should have taken better ones, right, for yourself, if there's better ones, then those separated as truma, separation is effective. So then what he separated, right, even though he didn't get permission, but now that he said you should have taken better for yourself, that he's saying that what you did in your act of separating truma is I'm okay with, then it's effective because the owner did not object. If there are no better ones, but a separation not effective, or statements were made as an objection. So he said, "Oh, you should have taken better quality fruit for yourself," but there wasn't better quality. That means he was really objecting, but it was, it's your friend, so you didn't want to say it in a way that was, confrontational. But that's what he meant. Therefore, the separation is not a separation of the truma. If the owner came and gathered the produce and added to the quantity separated, whether he possesses better produce or not, the separation is effective. So he added, so means he's added to that. So therefore, he's in agreement of what was separated. So whether he's adding better or not, even if he added better, as you might say, oh, so it means the other stuff maybe he's unhappy with because it was lesser quality produce. And he wanted to give, to the kohen better quality produce because look what he did. No. It's effective because he's adding to it. He's not making a new pile and considering that pile not to be truma. Number 4, there are 5 who should not separate truma, but if they do, their separation is effective. So we had 5 now that it's not effective, right? Now there's 5 that they shouldn't do it, but if they did it, it's effective. A person who is deaf, but not mute, right? Because, in other words, as an agent we're talking about, right? Before it was also an agent. He was an agent, was deaf and mute, because you need mental capacity for this. And therefore, right? But someone who's just deaf and not mute, so he has that. Actually, because he can hear the blessing. Because before he couldn't hear the blessing that you make with it, because you need to recite a blessing yourself or hear the blessing and answer Amen. So the deaf mute can't do either, so therefore he can't do the mitzvah, even though he might have the intelligence, right? We also spoke about emotionally and psychologically and mentally unstable. That was before, right? A person who is naked because he cannot recite a blessing. A person who is drunk, and a blind person because he cannot make distinctions and separate the more attractive portion as truma. So he's blind, so he can't take a better quality and give it to the kohen, right? So therefore he can't do it as an agent. We're talking about as an agent here, right? Now, but what was the halacha here? If he did it, it's still considered a separation.
Naked person? Recite a blessing?
Right. If you're naked, you can't recite a blessing. Yeah. Number 5. When a minor reaches the age when his vows may be of consequence, even though he has not manifest signs of physical maturity and he has not attained majority. So the boy's not 13, right? For example, or 12 or a girl. But they understand the concept of what it means taking a vow. So like they're 11 or 12 years old, for example. Separates truma, his separation is of consequence. So it's binding. Again, we're talking about doing it as a agent here, right? When it went and did it on your own without permission, it's a different stories we just learned. This applies even if in regard to truma mandated by scriptural law. Rationale is that the vows and their consecrations of property is valid according to scriptural laws explained in Hills and Dar. We just learned this, right? So someone, again, girl from 11 on, a boy 12 on, right? They don't have physical signs of maturity yet before they become the age of majority. they understand the concept of vows, they can be an agent. When a person tells an agent, go and separate truma for me, and he goes and separates truma, but the principal does not know whether he actually separated truma or not. Even when he discovers his truma was separated from the grain, we do not assume that he separated truma. For with regard to prohibitions, we apply the principle an agent can be assumed to have carried out a mission only when that leads to a stringency, not when it leads to a leniency. Instead, we suspect that another person separated truma without his permission. Interesting. So he doesn't remember. He was appointed as an agent. Oh, you know what? It's a busy day that day. I don't remember if I did it. But you see that there was a separation. The problem is, since he doesn't remember, we can't use that as there's a biblical law. And therefore, it could be that someone else did it without permission. So since it's a biblical law, we have to go based on that. So it's not good. Well, you separate again. Yeah. When a person tells an agent, go and separate truma, he should separate according to the temperament of the owner. If he knows that he is parsimonious, he should separate 1/60th, right? He's not very giving. If he is generous, he should separate 1/40th. If he does not know his temperament, he should make an average of 1/50th, right? 2%. If he intended to make the average separation, then to make the average separation, but it turned out that he separated 1/40th or 1/60th, his separation is effective, right? He meant to do one, but in the end, because remember we spoke about yesterday, because the Torah doesn't, the 1/50th, the Torah doesn't tell us this amount. It's actually a rabbinic, biblically, it's any amount. It could be a small amount, right? So since the Torah doesn't tell us, so we learned that you should not measure with a measuring cup to get it precise, because the Torah is not precise. So you won't be precise. So therefore the guy's doing it and it wasn't precise, and therefore he did more or he did less. From the 50th, he did it, right? So it's effective. Even then, to add the average separation, separate even 1/49, the separation is not effective. Not effective. Why? Because he added. Because the agent knew the amount the principal would prefer to give and intentionally gave more. Since he intentionally set aside a measure that differs from the principal's wishes, he is considered to act without permission. That's the concept. Okay?
Take away the money.
You have to give 1/50th. He gave what? He gave more, 1/49. There's an obligation to separate truma and tithes. Tithes being Meiser, remember? Right, that goes to the Levite. The truma is to the Kohen from brothers belonging to partners. As it says, your tithes in plural, implying even from two people. Right? It says, Meiser say him, chem. That's plural. Partners do not have a permission, do not have to receive permission from each other. If you're partners, you don't have to have permission to tithe. Instead, whenever anyone separates truma, that the separation is effective. The following rules apply when one of them separated truma, and then the other came and separated truma, because he did not know that his colleague had separated it. If they relied on each other, the truma separated by the second is not of consequence. Right? They're relying on each other. They're partners. So then the second one is not truma because it was already done. Right? If they do not rely on each other, but the first one separated an appropriate amount, the separation of the second one is of no consequence. If the first one did not separate the appropriate amount, separation of the second one is also of consequence. Okay. I got to stop here. I would love to continue. This is very geschmack, but all right. Thank you, folks. God bless you all.
Thank you, Rabbi.